What's happening, everybody? This is another video with your favorite Mr. Cater. In this video, we will be exploring how we can navigate within an Angular app using an Angular router built-in module. We'll also take a look at how we can pass data between these components as we are navigating, either by using dynamic route path, query params, or just a route state within our Angular app. As well, we'll take a look at how to lazy load components in Angular to ensure that our app speed can improve significantly without having to load the whole app all at once, but rather only load components as needed. Just a quick recap of what we have done so far is we were able to put together an app that has different cards that displays an image, and when clicked it just shows this very nice animation. What we intend to do here is by the time I click maybe this card, it should navigate or go to a certain route within my Angular app that will show a list of sheds that are available under a certain category. The question remains, how can we achieve that using Angular routes? What are routes in Angular? In Angular, routes are used to define the path within an application and map them to a specific component. So when a user navigates to a particular URL, the router determines which components to display based on the route configuration. This allows for a single page application experience where different parts of the applications are loaded dynamically without requiring a full page refresh. Don't worry, I will simplify all that by showing you how all this route stuff are set up and how we can even get to define our own routes within our app. In Angular, router is already pre-built, which means you just need to import and start using. So how do we then import and start using it in our app? You need to go to the app.component.ts, which you can just go ahead and import the router outlet from Angular/router. And then you go to your import statement and ensure that you have this router outlet imported there. And the next thing you need to do is to go to your app.component.html and have this selector named RouterOutlet. What this does is it kind of adds a very huge component that knows how to move within your app or your single page application, which is your Angular application. And yeah, that's it. Now you have got a router outlet within your app. Now it's time to configure a couple of routes within your app so that you can be able to start navigating. So you need to go to this file called app.routes.ts, and then you will find a variable called routes with an array. So go ahead and add an object, and the first property you want to put in, you can see it's suggesting already it's a path. And this path actually determines when you say / something, what is the name that you want to give it here. In my case, I will just say for when it's on, let's say, home, it should be able to go to the home component. And that's just it. And I think we can do something like we go to home. Should be able to show the home component that we have already configured with those different cards with images. There we go. It has loaded it just like that. But what happens if we don't even put in a path? It will probably just load a blank screen. And that is actually true because we didn't set what to do when the path is not provided. And for that, we just need to go and say, in the path like that, in an empty path, redirect to the home route, and obviously the path matches full. If I refresh that, you will see that it will do some redirection and it will go to the home path. Just gonna format that just so that it looks nice, and that is it. And obviously the last one, I always like to put this at the end here. It's In a case wherein we don't really know the path, or the path it's something that doesn't exist, what do we need to do? Do we just want to load a blank screen, or at least do we want to go and navigate to some sort of a default path? And we do it like that. So here in this case, it's saying that for any route that is not known, so when we do something like this, it should be able to just at least redirect to a component. In my case, I'll always kind of redirect it to the home component so that it can at least show something, and that should just work. Before I move away from the screen, I would like to add another component which I call product list. I've already added the component for that, so I'm just going to import it as well. I'll explain to you just now what this will do. Yeah, that's it. So what this will do is, this is going to be a component that is going to be shown whenever I click any of these cards. So I want to be able to say when I click any of these cards, it should show the list of products that exists under each and every category. For now, let's not worry about that, and let's take a look at how we can then register these routes so that our router outlet and as well as our main Angular app knows what to do when we go to these routes. So for us to be able to tell our Angular to register these routes, you need to go to a file called app.config.ts. By default, this will be done, but it's always good to just double check to ensure that your routes are registered. So you import something called provide router under @Angular router, and ensure that you put it in under a list of providers, and then you insert your routes constants that you were just on right now. So if I press F12, then you can see that it takes me to the list of those routes that I just configured now. And that's it. Your app should be able to route between different components. So far, we were only able to test if our routes works by just going straight to the URL and change that. But that's not really how things work in real life. We probably need to be able to either click a link within the app or click a button or do some sort of an event that handles that. So how can we go about it? Using the routerLink. So what you need to do here is, in the list of your inputs, add the router link, and the usage is quite simple. You just need to go ahead and add a link and then type router link followed by the path you would like to associate this router link with. In my case, I will say this is the home page, and then the other one would be the product list, and then let's say product list page. I'm gonna add some styles like background styles just so that this can be a bit visible due to our black background. I'm going to say that, and that should at least show us something. But the syntax here is quite simple, right? So the moment you say router link, you should be able to provide the name as you have configured it in here. So in my case, that is the home, and obviously there's another route that is product list, which is the second one that I provided here. That has to match exactly the very same way. If you want to have this router link dynamically, then you can just pass in this square brackets, and then maybe you have to put this in some sort of a variable within your component here as well. So what happens when you click this? When you click here, it should be able to go to the product list page, and then when you click the home page link, it should be able to take you to the home page. And that is how the router link works within your HTML file. Well, you can go ahead and just remove those links, and we go and do our navigation using the router service. How to incorporate it? You need to go to your constructor and then say private router and then router. Make sure that you're importing it from router, Angular router. So it will import something like this. And then if you add a function here, in my case, whenever I am clicking this on category detail click, this is a click event whenever I press any of these squares, right? So then I want to say that whenever I click this function, or whenever it gets fired, then I need to go and say this dot router dot navigate. I probably want to navigate to product list, and that should be fine. And whenever I click, it should be able to take me to the product list screen. Say we want to also pass in the category ID. When we navigate, we just have to add it as a second element into this navigate array. And whenever I click, you can see that right now it's not working. So what we probably just need to do is under this app routes, we need to have something like this to tell us that we are going to have an arbitrary ID here that can be anything that is passed onto a path of this product list. And now if I happen to click, you will see that the URL, if I expand this a little bit, you will see that the URL now has some sort of an arbitrary ID that is coming from the list of our categories. And that is actually just called navigating or routing to a dynamic route that you kind of, create on the fly. After successfully navigating to the product list page, you probably want to go and get this ID that is like either your books or your shirts or your mugs from the URL into the component that is on it. So Angular version 18 has introduced something very interesting where you can just use at input attribute, and the name should match exactly what you have here. And obviously the type can just be a string. You can initialize it with an empty string there. Ensure that at least it imports this. I think that's like that. And then ensure that this is imported from your Angular core. In this way, you should be able to just go in here and then call it like that, and it should show. The reason why it's showing for me is because I added one extra configuration in your apps.config.ts, which is this. You have to load this whole thing. They call it with component inputs binding. So what it does here, it will be like, okay, I know that there will be a dynamic route in here, and I would like to bind such a dynamic route to some sort of input attribute, and then let the user just use it within that component. And let's say we also want to pass in the title of this category. The way we would go about it, we would just have to say maybe something like title and then category dot title, and this will automatically just create a parameter on our route whenever we are navigating. So if I happen to save there and I click enter, this route here, it will look something like that. And for you to be able to receive this parameter that was passed from the home page, then you just click there and you can see I'm showing it here, right? But then I had to inject this activated route service and then call this dot activated route dot snapshot dot parameter dot get, and then you pass in the name of the parameter you're trying to get. Well, this is just saying that if it doesn't find that parameter, just type in this none in case, and then I definitely just went ahead and then just show it on my HTML. It's quite simple. There is so many ways you can pass data from the home page to your product list page and some of which includes having to do a shared service between these two components, and then you can assign some data there and then receive it on the other side. But I'll leave that for you guys to explore, and then just let me know how it went in the comment section below. And the last part is going to be lazy loading. So lazy loading is a design pattern that allows you to load your components only when they are needed, which can significantly improve the startup time of your application. I'll show you how we can go about it, right? In this small application of ours, it might not be that needed because it's quite a small sizable app. But then if it maybe the app gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we have so many pages, and this app is trying to load all of them at once, then you might just see the app a bit lagging. But then how can we achieve that? So yeah, at first we just have to open our network tab, and then to do that you just have to say right click, inspect, and then you should be able to see a tab like this one. If I refresh here, you will see that there are few JS files that were loaded here. So when I click here, nothing really happens because it's already loaded. But then check what happens when I add this lazy loading into this app. The syntax is quite simple. You just have to say load components, have this, and then have this arrow functions like that, have a keyword import, and then ensure that you put in the path of your component relative to this app.routes.ts file, and then you put in the component name like that. But what's going to happen here is going to shock you, right? So in this case, if I happen to go back to the home page, yeah, you will see now I'm back to the home page, right? It has loaded still those JS files, but then if you check here, it says it has loaded some sort of a chunk, which means it only loaded like a small portion of the app that it requires right now. And check what will happen underneath here. Whenever I click here, it goes and then add or load the chunk of this product list. But of course, to ensure that the app is quite fast, anytime I move to that, it doesn't go and re-download those files, but rather it has them locally, and then it kind of performs accordingly. This is quite useful if your app is quite big, but for smaller apps, you might not really see that much necessity, but it's always good to apply the best practices anytime you are doing your app. So two of my best practices, right? I would always advise you to not nest the routes if it's not necessary. It will work, but it's not really necessary to do something like this, where you can have product list /south /new and then something else. Try to keep your routes as clean as possible and as well as descriptive as possible, which means whatever you're going to be doing on that page should be defined somewhere, somehow within your route. In many cases, I always match my route name to my component name. And the second one is the order in which we put these small objects in our router or routes array matters. For example, if I put something here like that, it means that it will try to always route to the home page no matter what. So let's just give it a second. You can see that we are under product list. So if I put it again, you will see that it always route to home. It uses something called first match win strategy, which means the first match that it comes up across, then it will just go to that. So it's always a good idea to do this at the end and then anything else at the top. And the polls have decided we need to close this one with both isiXhosa and as well as Afrikaans. Otherwise, enkosi, bayadanki.